Hello there, and welcome to Nowhere to Hide. I'm Brian Hyde. Glad you could join me. There is so much going on in the closing hours or the closing days, I should say, of the Idaho legislative session. It's tough to keep track of it. Fortunately, there are a lot of people out there who are very informed and they live and breathe this kind of thing. I'm grateful to them. I'll tell you this though, one of the big issues that is really up for grabs right now is medical freedom for Idahoans. Looked like a slam dunk. A medical freedom bill passed the House and the Senate, but the governor pulled something, well, a little bit tricky last Saturday. We'll tell you more about it in just a moment.
All reporters are biased, the Idaho Press Club are biased, all media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Well, Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot.
That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
Dark money is influencing policy.
Once again, welcome to Nowhere to Hide. This is one of the big bills. I mean, every session has its big bill and the must pass, kind of legislation, but this one has a much more personal feel, primarily because of what we went through about 5 years ago, going through the COVID pandemic. And especially, it was the government response to the pandemic that did so much harm, more so even than the virus itself. Although to hear various news outlets talk about it or various politicians, well, we were just doing the best we could with the information that we had. But when push comes to shove, it was about scaring people into compliance, which I can presume was a test of some kind to see if it would work for other policies or other matters where we needed to be, brought into line. Let's talk a little bit about here's the headline from the Idaho Capital Sun, and it's so easy going. Well, Idaho Governor Brad Little vetoes bill to ban medical requirements in business, schools, and government. Well, of course we wouldn't want to have medical requirements, in schools, government, business, or we wouldn't want to ban those. I mean, that would just mean that we'd go back to living in the days of the plague and the dark ages. No, nope. There's more to it than that. But note that this is the first bill the governor has vetoed this legislative session. So let's talk about why exactly he vetoed it and kind of the way that he went around it. The Idaho Freedom Foundation says despite passing both chambers of our legislature the first time, Governor Brad Little decided to veto the Medical Freedom Act, which would have prohibited vaccine mandates and granted us rights to make our own medical decisions. Despite promises of a vote to override his veto, the Senate did nothing. This was actually a tweet from yesterday. So we're now fighting for a new bill to grant these freedoms based on the whims of the governor. Our freedom to our own health is under attack. Now, this is something you want to put on your calendar for tomorrow. That's why the Idaho Freedom Foundation is hosting a very special bonus Capital Clarity this Wednesday, featuring Health Freedom Defense President Leslie Manukian, and Dr. Ryan Cole, both of whom know a little bit about pushing back on the state for overstepping its bounds during the pandemic. So join us from noon to 1:30 on Wednesday to hear about all we can do to reclaim our rights and prevent big medicine special interests from ever controlling our lives again. And really, this is what it comes down to. It's not a matter of, well, this party needs to win or, this politician needs to win. It's a matter of, do you remember what was done to you in the name of we're just trying to protect you? But it was unreasonable. It was unconscionable kind of things. Arresting churchgoers for singing hymns in the parking lot of a church in Moscow. A mother being arrested for taking her kids to the park. And of course, all of the various requirements and all of the money that flowed from the federal government. Politicians can try to spin this as something positive. Well, we just did it because we love you. But it's very clear. And as you see some of the reasons why the governor offered for why he chose to veto this particular piece of medical freedom, it's not about representing the people of Idaho. This is about representing, well, the powers of the state and the various bureaucracies to which have attached themselves rather to the state. So let's take a little bit deeper look. This is from Leslie Manukian's Substack, and she says on Saturday, she describes, by the way, what's at stake here. A mere hour before it would take effect, Governor Little vetoed the bill that would secure the basic human right to direct one's own medical care. That's what's at stake. He claimed that it would prevent schools from sending sick children home. Nowhere does it say that in the bill. Nowhere does it imply it, but but there's just this one thing that bothers me, and that's what he clung to. An outright lie, says Leslie Manukian, as nothing in the bill alters existing code on communicable disease. Rather, it ensures that adults won't be coerced into medical interventions in order to live normally. Now, instead of acting in good faith, Governor Little cynically avoided any discussion with the bill's sponsors and then quietly issued his veto. You would think, right? If he had that concern, he could have brought that up at some point and said, well, let's make sure that we don't, set ourselves up for a situation where this could happen. That would have been easily done. And I agree with what Leslie says here. There can only be one explanation for this behavior. He wants to preserve his power to do it all over again. Now, that's not the same thing as saying he wants to do it again, but if something comes up, some kind of emergency, wink, wink, he wants to be able to claim that extraordinary power to force people to do things that they don't do or wouldn't do of their own volition. So she says, as you make this choice, ask yourselves, do you generally believe? This is an open letter she's written to the Idaho legislative members. Do you genuinely believe you or any other human being has the knowledge or moral authority to dictate another person's medical care? That's pretty straightforward. And how can any person claim that power when they do not have to live with the consequences of those medical choices? No one else knows what's best for us or has to live with the consequences of our choices. Conditioning participation in normal life on medical interventions is unconscionable. But that's exactly what they tried to do. That's exactly what people in power thought was in our best interest. So Leslie asks, I ask you to protect Idahoans from medical tyranny by overriding the veto. Which side of history will you choose? Now, here's the crazy thing. An alternative bill was brought up. I think it was Senator Foreman who proposed it, but it included carve-outs basically for like daycare and things like this. So yeah, adults, if you want your medical freedom, well, let's talk about that, but children can't have it. No, there's a line here that government needs to be pushed back across, and that is it has no authority, no moral authority to tell people what to do in terms of medical interventions. It just doesn't. And this whole idea of, well, but then parents would, be unable to have their sick child sent home from school. I'm sorry, it just doesn't ring true. In fact, I'm going to share a couple other things here with you. Brian Allman has, I think, a very good take on this at the Gem State Chronicle. That he actually put the question to AI, and I think you'll like the answer there. But again, I want to remind you, tomorrow at noon at the Lincoln Auditorium, if you're in Boise, stop by the Idaho State Capitol. Dr. Ryan Cole will be speaking, as will Leslie Manukian. And this is a time to really listen to their message. This is where it is absolutely crucial that you understand. It's not just about, well, let's make sure that this politician is validated or that politician. This is about you, your ability to make your own health decisions without being coerced or otherwise forced. That is of extreme importance. Now, let's get a couple other perspectives here. An alternative bill that was proposed there by Senator Foreman, as I understand, at least as of this afternoon, it sounds like that bill has been killed, and probably rightly so, because essentially it gutted the whole purpose for the Medical Freedom Act. And Misty for Liberty says, look, Idaho's Medical Freedom Act has been hijacked, but there's hope. She says there are people who will catch up on the creation and progress of Idaho's Medical Freedom Act, but then they'll fill you in on the shenanigans that have been taking place, including the carve-out bill for daycares. The draft of Senator Foreman's bill now has language providing medical freedom for everybody except children in daycare, and that's unacceptable. And again, it's protecting the state. It's protecting the power of the state, not protecting the people. So I wanted to give you Brian Allman's take on this because I thought he made a really cool distinction here. Maybe you're feeling like, well, what happened to our representative government? Why doesn't the governor respond? Or is this, the governor thwarting the will of the people? No, this is Brad Little being a pragmatist because he's doing what has worked for him. I play to the special interests and the connected industries that will keep me in office by supplying the money and the leverage to keep people afraid and therefore, keep me in office, as opposed to trying to play to a champion of freedom. Now, on Saturday morning, 90 minutes before the deadline, Governor Little vetoed Senate Bill 1023, the Medical Freedom Act. Here's the reason he gave in a letter to the Senate. Medical freedom is an Idaho value. However, this bill removes parents' freedom to ensure their children stay healthy at school because it jeopardizes the ability of schools to send home sick students with highly contagious conditions. Nowhere is that language found in the bill. Now, Brian says, I asked Grok AI to analyze both the bill and the governor's letter to assess the validity of his concerns. Check out this response. Grok said, Little's specific claim about sending home sick students has weak merit, as the bill doesn't directly impede that authority. His broader concern about health risks has more plausibility, but exaggerates the bill's scope and conflicts with his prior anti-mandate stance. The bill reflects a pragmatic worry about unintended consequences, but the definitions and text suggest schools retain enough flexibility to manage outbreaks without mandating interventions. It's that power of mandate that the governor just can't think of turning loose. Now, Brian says conservatives are desperately seeking a champion, a political warrior akin to our founding fathers, but Brad Little seems content to be a manager, the CEO of Idaho. In fact, our state constitution vests supreme executive power in the governor's office. And he wrote about this a couple of years ago. Is Governor Little a manager or a reforming statesman? He came from a family of sheep ranchers. He was on the board of the Idaho Association of Commerce and Industry, or IACI, for 20 years, including some time as its chairman. He was appointed to a vacant seat in the Senate in 2001, appointed to fill the vacant lieutenant governor position in 2009, then elected governor in 2018. Everything he achieved came because of the existing system. So why would we expect him to change it? It's a good point. That may not be a popular truth, but I think it's actually a very solid point. Last but not least, I wanted to share with you, this was a quote from Senator Glenita Zeiderveld. And this was her asking kind of the same question here. She asked, are we still a constitutional republic? I've made this comment more than once during this session. I feel more like a CEO of Idaho Inc. than a state legislator. The decisions we're making often feel less about preserving the values of a constitutional republic and more like managing a corporation, where budgets and bureaucracy take priority over protecting the liberties of the people. Benjamin Franklin famously said, "We have given you a republic if you can keep it." That warning wasn't just for his generation, it was for us. And so she says, I have to ask, have we lost our republic? I don't believe we have lost it, but we have definitely handed over a great deal of the control and allowed the transformation to where really it does feel like elected representatives, or at least the ones who seem to gravitate toward the top positions or seek those top positions, tend to serve the system above the people. Medical freedom is an issue that is purely about preserving the decisions of the people and their ability to make the best choices for themselves and for their family members, not some bureaucrat, not some politician. Isn't it interesting, though? You know, if they're in CEO mode, of course, well, we got to do what's best for the company. At least that seems like how they would think of it. But if they were really looking out for the people, they would know when it's time to step back, let go of the levers of power, and let the people make their own choices. Let's see what we can do to make sure that Idaho politicians recognize that difference and honor that difference, because really, our freedoms depend on it, and so do our children's freedoms. I'm Brian Hyde, and this is Nowhere to Hide.
All reporters are biased. The Idaho Press Club are biased. All media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
Dark money is influencing policy.